This podcast you're listening to right now is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download at audibletrial.com/bonfiresidechat. Over 100,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player.
Some of our landings were desperate adventures. We are now prepared to meet the inevitable counterattacks with power and with confidence.
My name is Gary Butterfield.
My name is Kole Ross.
This is Jason Killingsworth.
And you're listening to Bonfireside Chat, an undead favorite.
And this week we're going to be talking about World 1.1 and World 1.2 of Demon's Souls. As you heard, we're joined by Jason Killingsworth, who is the features editor for Edge magazine. Hi, Jason. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah. So we understand there's something that you want to announce, something you want to tell us about before we get started here.
Yeah, so a couple Australian game journalists, Brendan Keogh and Dan Golding, have started a new publishing company called Press Select, and they're going to be publishing book-length game criticism and finding authors who are obsessed with a certain game and want to write a lot of pages about that game. And so I am going to be writing a book about Dark Souls, which I thought would be nice to just to mention on a Souls podcast and have that be. I'm cited on the website as being an author that's going to be working with those guys, but the game hasn't been announced yet. So I thought this would be a cool place to just kind of make that public.
Absolutely, very neat. I know I'm looking forward to it, and it's the first. There have been kind of book length criticisms of games before. This is the first Dark Souls related one that I've seen, so that's definitely really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if any game can support that sort of that's intense of a staring contest, it's probably Dark Souls, and obviously you guys have devoted many hours to scrutinizing it on the Bonfireside.
Now I feel really bad because we're transcribing the entire podcast and publishing that as a book. So,
yeah, psych.
I knew this was a terrible mistake. Coming on here, I sensed there was something off about you guys, and now I know.
I have a confession, Kole. Every time I said I've been transcribing the podcast, I've been lying. I'm way too lazy, and my keyboard sounds like this. So I can't do it. I'm sorry. You're safe, Jason.
You've ruined me, Gary.
My legacy.
No. Yeah. No, we're coming for you, Jason. No.
I'm really excited about it, and Demon's Souls is. Actually, one of the sort of interesting things about writing the book is going to be figuring out how much you can really talk about Dark Souls without talking about Demon's Souls, and because the games are married together in so many ways in terms of the design, and obviously there's so many references between the two games and little echoes that sort of pop up in Dark Souls. So we'll see kind of how much Demon's Souls ends up sort of featuring in the book, how extensively it features in it. But
they definitely set each other off in a way.
They do. Yeah.
You unlike the two of us play them in release order. That's correct. So you had experience with Demon's Souls first.
I did. Yeah. I didn't know word one about the lore of the game when I was playing it. It was all a mystery. I was just fighting my way out of the center of this enigma and just trying not to die, basically. And then now, of course, later, and I think that's probably most people's experience of the game is that they're just trying to stay alive, and then later on they realize that there's this whole constellation of story points constantly orbiting around them as they're moving through the world that they didn't even realize were there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are a lot of changes between the two games to make that more explicit in Dark Souls. So when you say you didn't know word 1 about the Demon Souls Lord, like I feel like there's probably 3 words on it. So you're almost 1/3 the way there.
Yeah.
Like I've definitely been kind of scouring. Like I feel like I've got a good handle on the areas we're doing now for sure. But yeah, I think that's going to continually be a theme. So previously, we completed the tutorial area and we kind of poked our heads around the Nexus, but we hadn't really gotten to the meat of the game. At this point, there's just one Archstone active, and we're going to head there to check out Boletarian Palace.
Yes. So, yeah, why don't we just kind of like jump right in? You get here, you have this awesome view of this huge facade, of the outside wall. And this whole area is pretty much you trying to make it through the gatehouse, right?
Well, there's a cutscene in the beginning first.
Oh, yeah, true.
With the dragons.
Yeah. Which sets up... when I was kind of like in the thick of it, I didn't realize how much the dragons were playing a part in this, but like they figure into all of them except 1-3, right? All of the World 1 areas, right?
Which one has the sort of dragon carcass?
Oh yeah, that's 1-4.
Yeah.
So one of the dragons gets killed there,
right?
Yeah. Or a separate unrelated dragon.
Yeah,
gets killed there, but only one of them makes it past 1-1.
The third dragon is killed by the second gunman.
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
Well, and I think this is the first dragon in a video game because there have been so many dragon cutscenes in video games. I think this is the first one where there are 100 corpses stuffed in its mouth. It's like a little kid who's like stuffing too much food.
Pizza contest. Yeah. So that's a real clear signal, and I like how that's the first thing you see, but that is not the boss of the area. That's not they are an environmental hazard. Mm-hmm. For the most part, even though you can defeat them. I've never killed either of them. Yeah, they're very tough. But when you're talking about this being, trying to get through this gatehouse, like the one thing that links this world that really impressed me is that the way that the Boletarian Palace is designed is for defense.
Right.
Against an invading army or a neighboring nation, and that plays against you the entire time you're playing. So this is explicitly built to keep you out.
Well, I feel like it's such a beautiful statement of purpose for the whole Souls series. Like the very first thing you see is just a wall that's about 100 feet high that just doesn't want you to broach it, to enter, and I feel like so much has been said about how forbidding the difficulty of these games is, and the way that it kind of fends off newcomers, and to have the very opening of the game begin with just a big wall blocking you from where you're trying to go, I think is just such a beautiful, almost brute force way of communicating what the whole game is about.
It might as well just be a dude who is standing at the gate pointing in the opposite direction silently. Just away. Yeah.
And there's pointing towards Skylanders. Go! You want dragons? Go check out those Skylanders.
Yes.
And there's 4 locked, 4 closed gates. Sort of dead ahead, and then when you get up to that, there's 2 on either side, and then 1 behind you, and they're all closed. At first, it just looks like there's nowhere to go. Mm-hmm. I think the mind games kind of start in the very first minutes of
and it's incredibly satisfying that throughout the course of this, I think that this is the most shortcut heavy level in the game. And as you're going, you are methodically opening each of those gates, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, depending. Some of them you're opening, and then the one behind you, which opens up with World Tendency. Which should we talk? Since that's geographically here, should we talk about the execution area now? Even though you're very unlikely to have unlocked it here chronologically.
Yeah, because I think that it's actually really cool that you think this is just that leads outward, but it's actually into a really gross area.
Well, I saw it from up above.
Oh, you did?
And yeah, you can see it from, there's like a little drop you do to get the crossbow, like a little hidden landing. And I saw the execution area and wanted to visit it. And you can see items down there. Mm-hmm. from there. So I knew you could get there, but I had no idea how. So essentially, like, immediately to your left, you're kind of going up this ramp, and there are hollows behind these. I don't know what you would call those kind of defensive, the shields that they put up, those wooden kind of blockades.
It's like sandbags, but wood. The wood bags.
Yeah.
Wood bags.
Yeah, those bags of wood.
Yeah.
They got big stacks of mulch from Lowe's, and they're hiding out. But to the left, there's a little area that goes down to the execution grounds, and this is the first tenancy event that you can find in the game. You go down here, and it's also the first time you're going to run into Black Phantom enemies that get summoned in. So there are tons of people who have died down here. There are lots of corpses with unknown soldier souls, and these groups of Black Phantom dreglings that get summoned that hit like a motherfucker. Like this is the earliest you're going to find the difference between what it means when you see somebody glowing red and black. And they are really, really tough and always attack in a group. But kind of the big feature here is Executioner Meralda, who is up near the top, kind of by like a corpse pit, right?
Yeah.
Like what you would call that area. Like there's a ladder to go down there, but I don't know why you would ever go down there. It drains into a moat or something.
That actually could explain the dragon's mouth being full of, almost like a seagull scavenging on a dumpster, full of trash. It's like if you had a big pile of corpses and you wanted, to just get a nice meal, then it could have just swooped down there, kind of just taken a big bite out of that mound of flesh, and then landed on the bridge.
Yeah, before you start, because the bridge, the next 1-2 is explicitly a feeding ground. For them, they say so. This could be initially where they kind of fill up and then go kind of bask in the sun for a while, a little later on the level, and then head on to 1-2 to start harrying the soldiers there.
Yeah.
Well, since that dragon sort of has to fly on an infinite loop along that bridge later on, he's probably just needs a lot of energy to keep him going.
He's so tired. Executioner Meralda is a relatively she is an interesting character in that so what I get from her is that she is loyal to the king. I think that she knows what's going on with King a lot, that he's been corrupted, but I got this impression that she's been kind of waiting for this to happen. Like she's taking glee in this. She's got a real kind of like she's only talked to me once. Like when you guys have encountered when I came back in New Game Plus is when she actually spoke to me. I'd never heard the dialogue before.
No, I've never encountered the dialogue either.
Yeah. She just kind of cackles and says, you were a fool to go against the king. It's not that noteworthy, but that's the impression that I get, is that she was she's so loyal, and also the way the weather has changed kind of matches her sadism, and in that way she actually is a lot like Smo. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's an interesting parallel as well. The two executioners.
Yeah.
And
would you rather have your head chopped off or flattened with a hammer? I think is the choice you'd be looking at between the two of them.
Huh. Okay, so hammer, because if it's chopped off, the head still stays alive for a couple of seconds.
But if it's the hammer, you get eaten.
Oh.
Afterwards, your bones get ground up and spiced into stew by Smo.
Turned into bread.
I would take the axe, because if your head gets smashed with a hammer, when they put it up on the spike on the city gate, you look like you have this really, really fat round face.
Yeah, I don't want to look like an idiot.
No.
I'm imagining like a Who Framed Roger Rabbit style, like flattening in a steamroller.
I might also take the axe too, because I'm watching the video of it right now just to refresh my memory. It's a cool looking axe.
Yeah, and hard as shit to get.
Yeah.
Because this way will open up in pure white or pure black world tendency, which we talked a little bit about last episode. The difference being is that if you pure white, you run into the actual Executioner Meralda. It is her human form, and she drops her armor and a ring where the mechanics of it I don't totally understand. It says it increases the power of direct hits.
Yeah, so there's glancing blows and then there's direct blows, which is something that was not carried over into Dark Souls.
And that was all about proximity to the enemy. If you had the right position, you could land a direct hit.
I've never used it because it lowers. It said it increases the damage on direct hits and lowers indirect hits. So I didn't trust myself, to consistently get direct hits.
Yeah.
And she's a tough fight here. And then if you go in Black World Tendency, you get her Black Phantom form, which is probably, so I just before we started recording, started doing some Black Tendency stuff. The two of them that I fought in this world, which are the only two I fought, were the two toughest NPC battles I fought in any of the Souls games.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she is very hard, and the only way I managed to kill her was through kind of dumb luck. It was my New Game Plus character at the Meat Cleaver, which has an insane knockback, and I actually knocked her into the execution pit, which, what a nice action movie moment.
Yeah.
Just, I wish I could come up with some kind of, like, execution-related...
Well, that's like slapping someone with their own hand, because if you sort of execute an executioner by kicking them into their own execution pit, it's kind of...
Why are you executioning yourself? Why are you executioning yourself?
It's like the end of The Cable Guy, where Jim Carrey gets killed by dropping onto a satellite. Yeah. Cable Guy reference, you guys.
Yeah. What year were you born? No, I'm just saying it makes sense for Cable Guy reference.
Yeah.
So
it's
really tough.
After Jim Carrey, I think is
okay. So there's BC before Carrey, and
yeah. And then kind of like lore wise, the big thing is at the bottom of this kind of corpse pit, she has you find the brushwood armor, which is kind of known to be used by the knights of King Allant. I feel like what I think this is, so I was thinking about whether this was Valorfax or not. It's tricky, though, because you find a ring that we know belongs to the Twin Fangs later by that area where the dragons are sunblasting. Sunblasting. It's slightly extreme. Yeah,
when you need to get tan fast.
So my thought was, and this is just 100% pure speculation, is that Valorfax, who was sent out to tell the world about the plight of the fog, came back. He made it to the dragons and died. And then Esmeralda, the dragons are not attacking her because they're both shitheels. And she took the armor, took his corpse away from that to hide it because his brother's still around.
Right.
So this was a hiding place, was kind of what I took from it. I don't have that much to support that, other than the fact that it justifies a contradiction in two items that should be unique to somebody being in two separate places.
The only other explanation that I could make up would be kind of just bullshit, time is timey-wimey kind of thing. Just kind
time
of
is not as timey-wimey, though.
I know.
There's no time. Yeah.
Like I said, bullshit. It'd just be like, well, there's probably multiple versions of him, or body form, spirit form. But that doesn't adhere to the rules as much as yours does. So
yeah. I don't think that's one of the things I like about trying to puzzle out this lore, is that there isn't just the hand wave.
Right.
So yeah, I'm fairly certain that time is just timey, and there's no wimey.
Well, I was reading something last night, and it was talking about how the more lore elements you give players, the more opportunities you have for those little contradictions to seep in. And they're actually, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but there are some really striking kind of contradictions, even sort of in this area with Bjorn and Valorfax.
With the Stravas.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so the more sort of ethereal it remains, the less chance you have of just sort of stepping on your own toe.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And there's a big contradiction that comes out in the Monumentals explanation cutscene that actually resolves, to my mind, one of the big things that we talked about last episode, which is is Boletaria the world, or is Boletaria one of the kingdoms? It's one of the kingdoms. I just hadn't played to that point yet. But they say it's the world or the land of Boletaria. In one of those, so they're not afraid to contradict themselves, and it's up to us to kind of sort out what's meaningful and what's not.
Yep.
I think it's interesting that both of you had a much different experience of this level. I mean, this was the level that I just crushed my face against for hours. I mean, you came to this as experienced, seasoned Souls players, like having played Dark Souls multiple times, and so you had that experience coming into it, whereas this was my first time ever playing a Souls game, sort of figuring out which button was mapped to light attack and heavy attack, and I just got absolutely humiliated by the Dreglings on this first this stretch of bridge leading up to the castle.
Yeah.
So I spent hours on just the stretch, sort of leading up inside the wall.
Yeah, if you could see our play clock in the lower undead or the undead burg,
yeah,
we had a very similar experience.
Yeah,
I
think it took me 7 hours to get past the Taurus demon, like all told. Like that's what my play clock was at there. So yeah, you just that explains the difference in the experience.
It's interesting too. Or go ahead.
I think I toyed with the idea of quitting, like at a certain point on this stage, and I just, the guy who'd recommended the game to me, sort of another journalist, Michael Abbott, and I just said, I just feel like I'm raking these hours into like a pile of leaves, like raking them into a pile and just lighting them on fire. It just was, there was no sense of accomplishment, and then it just gradually, finally started to coalesce.
What kind of character were you playing as at the time? Because that's a real. I feel like even a little bit more so in Dark Souls, that is kind of a difficulty selector.
Yeah, I mean, I always play as a warrior on my first playthrough, because I think like that's the most intimate experience you can have in an action game, because you're always going to be up close. You're going to you have to learn every enemy's moveset really well. You can't just stand at a distance and spam them with magic. So so I, as a rule, I'll always play as a warrior on my first playthrough, and then just get the enjoyment of rolling around and firing soul arrows.
Yeah. Yeah, that could definitely make a big difference. One thing that's interesting is when you transition from one Souls game to another. When I picked up Demon Souls after having played Dark Souls, seeking that same experience, you do have that. Your skills remain intact since the combat engine is more or less the same, and you lose some of that crushing difficulty. But what you get is knowing the kind of things that Dark Souls did. I still got a thrill of unpredictability to it, so I still really wanted to know what was around the corner. Like I was really expecting some real kind of fuck you tricks to happen, and that definitely happens. But the actual just like a one-on-one combat, scenario, I feel very confident in, and that's something that I think you only get once. And it's interesting. I'm glad that we're able to have, and we have other people who are coming on later in the season who played Demon Souls first as well, so we can get that kind of perspective, even though Kole and I did not get it. So.
Yeah, I mean, this area, too, is just, it's such a gray area. Like, it's the most sullen place in all of video games. I mean, the grass is like a gray shade of green. Everything is like...
everything else is a gray shade of gray. So,
it is.
Yeah.
Like, none more gray.
Kind of speaking of... unpredictable kind of dick move things. So like if you get to the top of this, you only have one way to go. You head left, and then kind of on your way to get into the castle proper, or like the guardhouse proper rather, there's this big glowing pit, which is where Executioner Meralda sticks her dead bodies.
Right.
I think that's supposed to be, that's the same pit. And those are souls kind of wafting up.
Yeah. I just get the sense that so many people have been thrown into this corpse pit that is just lousy with these souls that are trying to just hover around.
Like if souls gave off a stench, like that's the vapor.
Yeah. It smells like souls in here. And people, I definitely, when I came, walked by, somebody had left an unscrupulous, if you take a step forward, treasure or whatever the trolling message you can do in the Demon Souls message engine, and walked into it thinking that there might be something neat, or I might float down or like that.
This time there's going to be something really good at the bottom.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
The definition of insanity.
Do you want to hear something just appallingly embarrassing?
Yes.
I jumped into it today. Because I
Oh,
forgot. I forgot. I just kind of like, oh, okay. So just in the interest of seeing everything so I can talk about it, I jumped in and was like, brrr.
You die so quick, too.
Yeah. Like the
It's
kill
like an
box
instant
is
kill
like
box,
5
yeah.
foot below. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I like to imagine is going to happen is like in a Disney cartoon where the princess, like when she's transforming from like, scrubbing the floors into the princess in the full gown, and she kind of twirls around and all these little sparkly things kind of transform. That's what I like to imagine happens when you jump into that thing. All those things just kind of pick you up and you twirl in the air, and it sets you down on the ground, and you're wearing some.
Get you ready for the ball. The big Bolletarian court ball.
I was going to ask you guys, why do you think it's called a palace? Because I mean, this is a castle. Like, this is such a minor, apparently insignificant point. But why is it called a palace when it's not what I think of as a palace? Do you think this is just some kind of translation? Sort of
The end of 4-4, where you go to fight King Allant, is a little bit more palatial.
Yeah.
So I think that it is a castle surrounding a palace is the closest thing I could come up with. Like that kind of ornate elevator in the area where you fight Allant.
Yeah.
Which that's not really we said we don't really have a spoiler policy. We're not going to talk about the end game, but there's that. We can't really talk about Boletaria Palace without talking about Allant.
They set up Allant as the guy you're going after from the very beginning too. So
yeah. But that area is a little bit more palatial. So that's the way I read it, is that you're heading towards the Boletarian Palace, and these are all obstacles defending this kind of kingpin of the world situation.
Yeah. And 1-3 has like living, like it looks habitable, whereas 1-1 and 1-2 are just, military fortifications. I don't know what a palace is. What distinguishes that from a keep or a castle or an ossuary? I don't know.
Yeah. About 10,000 orphans is what separates it from an ossuary.
I know. I was just going to say, but it's the comedy third option.
Yeah.
So
10,000 Maniacs, the orphan edition.
Yeah. Don't talk about the weather.
Okay.
A deep cut. So you're kind of making your way through this castle, and that defensibility keeps coming back again and again. Like there are ambushes set up for you, like multiple choke points. So the way this level is designed to keep out people, it's also trying to keep you out. Lots of kind of you go into a darkened room and there are people hiding in the dark, ready to stab you.
Can we talk about how creepy these dreglings look, or whatever they are? The masks that they're wearing.
Yeah, like the wooden, it looks like a little bit like the Majora's mask in Ocarina of Time. Like
the wood Deku mask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they have 3 or 4 kind of pieces of wood that look kind of banded together, just covering their eyes. I just the kind of mental image I have is of just the worst atrocities you could imagine are happening, before their eyes, as this place is going to seed, and they just doing anything to just try to block out, what they're seeing, like even just sort of banding sort of pieces of wood to their face just to blind themselves to what they're seeing and to the trauma around them.
See, I read it the opposite way. Like, I read it as these are people who have had their souls, sucked out, and they're in the process of degrading themselves. And so they wanted to, affix something to their faces so that, they wouldn't read as being like, oh, yeah, they're pretty far gone, as being hollow, or whatever the equivalent of hollow is here.
Yeah.
Well, there's different types, but there's no. I mean, their movesets are identical. It's interesting. Usually, when this is the enemy with the wood on his face, he's going to be a bit harder. He's going to, whereas the one sort of without that would maybe be a slightly easier enemy. I like even that idea of having that variation, but just for purely kind of aesthetic value.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always got the regardless, which I think those are both cool ideas for the explanation. And then the guys with the wood on their face, I think these are villagers. So this is what happens to regular people when they get there. And you can tell kind of from their fighting style and the fact that they have kind of done this to their face. So I think they're kind of the easy prey for the demons, and that could either terrorize them into, kind of insanity and not wanting to see things, or have made them so far gone as to start affecting themselves. Because they're definitely different than the regular soldiers that you end up fighting. Who my impression was that these were still people who are just loyal to King Allant. Maybe corrupt the same way that Meralda is, but that they're not. They still have their souls.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely don't have any. There's no zombification sort of apparent.
Yeah. They've got a piece of wood in their back pocket in case. Don't get me wrong, but they haven't whipped it out.
If they get unlucky tonight, they're
yeah. Hey, buddy, you're getting unlucky tonight. See this?
Yeah. But you're working your way through kind of like the inner portion of these walls, through the scaffolding and everything. And they have set up these traps. This is where you get the good old boulder trap. I think it's one of the only ones in the game, actually.
Yeah, I don't think that happens again. There's some other traps in 5.1.
Yeah.
But yeah, not like boulder style traps like this.
Well, there's two on this level. The second one is obviously a pile of boulders, but
oh yeah, the one that you use.
So you have kind of two in fairly quick succession. But obviously that one you can turn the tables, and I wonder if they're placed in such close proximity. Just for the savvy player who realizes, I can this one I can actually sort of unleash myself by.
Yeah, these hurt.
I can sort of chop the grading on this one and send these sort of rolling over some other people, whereas I was the one who got flattened earlier. Who knows? Maybe.
Yeah.
So a few boulders.
So I mean, you're going, you're climbing up past this kind of boulder trap, and you start running into, enemies are throwing fire at you from really defensible positions. If you did not choose a ranged class, you kind of have to get through all towards making your way towards the top, and it's a pretty lengthy, or feels like a very lengthy stretch without a shortcut. Like the first shortcut's coming up, but I've definitely in this little interior wall area, got hit in the back with a firebomb, stun locked and killed by a torch wielding dreadling like multiple times, and had to make this run back up. It's the first time, even on my first playthrough, and I was fairly confident, that I ended up having to do learn the Dark Souls lesson of like patience on replays, trying to run back and get my souls and getting murdered. And weirdly, in New Game Plus, you can't spend souls as soon as you start. You have to beat this level before you can spend them. So you can end up with hundreds of thousands of souls from the end game, and then you still have to get through this area and beat phalanx before you can do anything with them, which makes this extra harrowing there.
And the caution thing is actually really important, because this is laid out almost like in switchbacks. People can get up behind you really easily. So you get to the top of this wall, and you see these awesome ballistas and catapults and things like that. I guess the ballista. Yeah, they be ballistas. Being pedantic about medieval weaponry. And you get up here and you find a Blue Eye Knight and a Red Eye Knight, which are kind of the counterparts to the Black Knights in Dark Souls.
Yeah, I remember this being a moment for me, like a real comparative moment, where I felt like the Black Knights in Dark Souls really telegraphed to me that they are going to be serious business from a distance. Whereas these knights, since they have roughly the same build, like they look a little bit tougher, but it's not quite. They're not, drawn with that differently than the regular NPCs. When I walked to the Red Eye Knight and he one-shotted me, outside of old King Doran, I was pretty irritated because I didn't feel like there was anything to indicate that I shouldn't have fought him.
Did you engage him before the Blue Knight when you first played?
Yeah,
Blue Eyed Knight?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I went right after I left, and not for any particular reason, just the way I happened to go. And then later, I've seen messages, beginners should try this area later, and I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But up until that point, I remember being very irritated with that. Probably just because if I would have went left, I would have got that shortcut, and then not been that big a deal. But that's one thing that I get a little frustrated with. Like, it wouldn't make any sense for these guys to be 9 feet tall and and still have them just be regular knights. And their eyes do glow, which I get it. I understand. But the I remember it being very frustrating to me the first time I encountered it.
You do have that one blue-eyed knight in the tutorial stage, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
So
he's a pushover.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, so you at least know what he's going to do, and it's basically just a lot of blocking and trying to teach you to two-hand your weapon to guard break. But
if you two-hand that redhead, he's using a spear and a shield, so he can attack while blocking. Which that you haven't run into that very much at this point. I think you run into one spearman right on the way to him, actually. Which is but he's also he just hits harder.
And they have that really long kind of runway sort of leading to him, which I just love how they designed that, because seeing him start that jog towards you, it is just it's perfect, because there's so much time for the intensity to build as he just closes that distance between you. It's fantastic.
I'll give you a head start. I'll count to 10.
Start running now.
Pretty much. Something that I feel like they learned a little bit of a lesson with these guys, and transforming them into the Dark Knights or Black Knights in Dark Souls. In Dark Souls, they have a really awesome lore reason for being there, and that's not something that was a priority in this game. Kind of giving each enemy kind of a reason for being what they are. In this, you're fighting a lot of what are apparently just real humans. And here, so I kind of found myself trying to do mental gymnastics to figure out, why are your eyes glowing? Why are you breathing like Darth Vader? Why are you attacking me on sight? Stuff like that. And then it really just kind of comes back to video game.
I think of them as demons the same way that the fat officials are demons.
Oh yeah.
So those things are. I mean, I think that's in the game description that those guys are actually demons, and I think of them because they're not soul starved, because of their fighting style, and they're not regular people because they're so much tougher. I just thought of these as another type of demon.
Okay.
So, like a minor demon.
A demon did it.
Yeah, a demon did it.
Yeah.
So you've got in the notes that you're unable to get into the mausoleum until the end of the game. It's actually not the case.
Really? I thought you needed Strava's key.
Yeah, you can get that. He just has to drop it. So, I mean, you have to be pretty monstrous to murder a Strava. but you can do it. And rather than there's not that much to talk about it. Can we briefly talk about, rather than going back here after we do 1-4?
Oh, yeah, sure.
There's not too much to Old King Duran. He's really neat from a lore perspective, though. He is a legendary leader in Boletaria. And he's known, I think it's the great hero or the old hero. No, it's not the old hero. It's like how you sometimes know more than one person named John. Do you mean old hero that lives over by the cliffs, or old hero that we like? But he's kind of this figure of mythology to them, and you go into the mausoleum, and he's standing there staring at you with his sword drawn, and you do a fight with him. He says he needs to test you before he can give you one of the legendary weapons of the family, and he gives you the Soul Brand sword. If you're able to get him down to 25% damage, which is not too tough to do, really hard to do it right away here, but I've seen it done online. And then if you want to murder him and get his clothes, as is your motivation for killing most NPCs in these games. Hey man, I want your jacket.
It's like the medieval version of killing someone for their Air Jordans or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh no,
your Air Alliance.
That's almost exactly what I was going to say. So,
but then he becomes I couldn't beat him. He does so much damage through your shield. He does so much magic damage. With his weapon, it's incredible.
Does his difficulty just spike after you move past that point?
He starts two-handing his weapon. He becomes more aggressive. I should say that, just for full disclosure, I said this off mic, but I was doing this in New Game Plus because I was trying to do tendency stuff and things I hadn't done before with a character who had the entire world unlocked. So we had that New Game Plus boost, which is a big deal. To kind of ameliorate that, though, I had endgame equipment and had a really strong character build, so he still was able to two-shot me through my shield. So yeah, he does significantly more damage. And before you fight him, before he is trying to kill you, when he's just testing you, that's actually not too difficult for me. So it becomes a really, really tough fight. In order to get his clothes, is the only real advantage for that.
Yeah, I love the way that he's designed.
He's got a real good look.
Yeah,
he's foreshadowed during those title screen too, those loading screens. Yeah, and saw him, and I was my first playthrough of the game, I never ran into him. I had no idea who he was. Like, I got that key and forgot to go check it out or something. And that was always a dangling thread. Like, who is this old King Doran? That's great. Is he an alternate boss? Is he something like that? And then eventually I figured it out.
And I think with his mask, he doesn't even... he isn't apparently human. Like, he has this... He looks like some kind of ancient totem or... or some stone beast. I don't know. Like a golem of some sort.
Yeah,
because of that incredible mask.
Yeah, I always read him as being a stone beast. The sense that I got was that it was like a death mask. This is his like ceremonial funeral garb, in that, like, we want to bury him as he was remembered by the people. So that's why his face is he's got that armor that is helmet that's his face and his crown, right?
Also, when we were talking about that red-eyed knight, that night being just like a really awesome, just kind of a vista opening up to you and being very dramatic. Like, opening up the mausoleum looks great, too. Like, that's a really cool, like, kind of shudder moment of, I'm in for some shit. But you do have to, you don't have to sequence break. You do have to be a bad person to get this early in the game. However, by killing one of the saddest characters in this, who we're going to run into very soon. Yeah.
Should we talk about Demon Brand, or do we want to get to that when we? We
can. Well, yeah. Demon Brand is there's two legendary souls, or swords that are for the kingdom. One of which they say strengthens man against demons, and one kills man. One is good against man, and this is the one that is good against demons. It's stronger the better your alignment is. The closer to pure white character tendency you are. And you get the demon version, the evil version, at the end of the game. Yeah, and then they can be fused to form something called the Northern Regalia. Yeah, which I've always heard regalia. I always thought that was clothing. Yeah, that's what that word meant.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the equivalent of I'm gonna forget his name. Artorias, his sword, the Artorias Greatsword, in that it requires such absurd stats, right?
Yeah. It's really game breaking. Like, it's a New Game Plus weapon. You can only get it in New Game Plus, and you only need it in New Game Plus. Right. So
yeah. So I just wanted to we mentioned the sword.
Oh for completeness, that makes sense.
Yeah. But you can proceed. So the Blue Eye Knight is kind of guarding one of those mist doors or fog gates, and you can proceed, past the walls for the first time and into actually kind of what appears to be like military training grounds almost.
Before you do that, you want to actually head past them and unlock a shortcut. Yeah. And get a ridiculous item to get this early. Like, the game, this game is cruel, but it gives you some real serious concessions. Not least of which is that very early on you find this an item called the Cling Ring. Yeah. Which is you're probably going to have locked to your finger for a large portion of the game.
Yeah. What that does is it, instead of being at 50% health when you're in spirit form, you're at 75% health, which goes a long way towards kind of ameliorating that psychic angst that a lot of people feel when they are, when they're encountering...
When they're attacked by Mewtwo?
Yes, when they're attacked by Mewtwo. Just kind of like, see, wait a minute, I'm at half health this entire time? No! Okay, this makes it a little bit better.
It just sounded like a Pokemon attack. Yeah.
It does seem like the precursor to the ring in Dark Souls, that it gives you that boost, but obviously shatters when you take it off. Yeah. I wonder if it was a balancing move. That was the same ring that they were designing, but they sort of looked back and realized that it was overpowered, and probably knew it was when they were designing it, but then said, okay, well, we need to add this new element to it where you can't take it off.
And hide it behind a lot of the game.
Yeah, exactly. As opposed to like having it sitting on top of the first horse corpse you come to.
I love all the horse corpses that are spread throughout.
Yeah, poor guy.
Oh man.
Yeah. So you go down. You want that shortcut. You also at this point can kind of knocking down some hanging corpses, find a jade ornament, which comes into play a little bit later.
Yeah.
When we're in the Nexus. But if you go, you kind of follow the critical path down. You see this military training ground. There's two ways to go here. One of which is an NPC setting a trap for you, where he has all these flaming jars or barrels around him, and he's willing to blow everything up in order to take you with. It's better though, however, to roll off the stairs and head straight down, because you'll see a non-aggressive NPC down there, and unless this is the first one that you've seen, because you can't have gone to Doran yet.
Right.
And this character, and also speaking of game-breaking rings,
yeah,
like they give you both of them in the space of like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So where you get the thief ring, which makes it enemies take longer to aggro you, like reduces their detection range, I think.
Yeah, it's downright essential for later portions of the game.
Yeah, and it plays into one of those major gameplay differences between Dark Souls and Demon Souls, is that in Demon Souls, stealth is an option. So there are areas that you can straight up sneak through, which is really cool if you have the right kind of equipment set. But let's talk about Ostrava, because this is going to be a through line through the entire time we're talking about Boletaria.
Yeah. So Ostrava, you get the sense that he's on this quest. You're always rescuing him, so he's kind of like a cross between Solaire and Sigmire. I feel really bad that I keep on comparing stuff to Dark Souls.
It's going to happen.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
Disclaimer: we're just going to keep doing it.
But yeah, but in each area, you have to kind of like rescue him from these dire fates. So you find him here, and he's surrounded by dreglings. He kind of like got himself backed into a corner, and if you help him out, he kind of continues his march onward.
I love so like one of the things I get the impression of him as being kind of a pampered royal. Like he knows a lot about the theory of how to fight. Like he was probably trained his entire life, but knows very little about the practicality of it. That's why you're always rescuing him. The confidence with which he delivers his dialogue here is hilarious. Like if you're able to find it, Kole, cut it in. But if not, he's just like, that was a bold jump indeed. Like like he's just very like acute, like declarative and almost accusatory in his voice acting.
Well, the more ornate the armor, the more kind of you're just the sort of showpiece on the horse, kind of give morale, and he does that. Like his shield, at least, is really splendorous, and you can picture him just kind of sitting up there on the horse. Like if he doesn't fall off, he's accomplished his objective for the battle. Like
he was riding one of those poor guys out in the I almost just said the foyer. That's not what you call the beginning of a castle.
Yeah, it's foyer, actually.
Yeah, foyer.
The castles have foyers.
Yeah. You can imagine him pulling this shield down from like a display rack, and it's also it mechanically works too, because you can get that shield later, and it's ill suited to fight these characters. So that's really interesting. Like his equipment, which is all based on defending against magic, and he's there's no magic at this point up to the game that you're defending against. So he's ill equipped for this, and you kind of rescue him. Again, very similar to that Sigmire situation with the Chaos Eaters, in Lost Izalith. And if you do, he gives you a brass telescope, the traditional saving gift of Boletaria. And continues
it's like the gold
on,
watch. The gold watch after working 50 years. Here's your brass telescope.
The brass telescope anniversary. It's been 1 minute since you rescued me. And then he continues on his mission. I don't know how much of his mission he'll talk about here, but essentially he's going to go see if the rumors are true and that his father has been corrupted.
Do we know that it's his father yet?
I don't know what. Like I said, I don't know what is revealed here.
Yeah.
He is his father. I don't know if we know it yet.
Yeah.
He reveals it maybe in a later line of dialogue.
Yeah. So
because even his name is like he is going by a false name.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Just really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Oh. Yeah. Yep. So like after you rescue him here, he just he does reveal it. Yeah. You go back to the Nexus if you don't go right to 1-2, and he's there and he says, "I refuse to believe that this is what Father wished for our great land." Mm-hmm. So he pretty much says, My father may or may not have wished for something, is also responsible for this. Alent is responsible, ergo.
Right,
Ostrava,
right.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when we talk about him being, ill-equipped and kind of pampered, like you almost get, maybe he's like been studying abroad. At this point, like he's coming back and has just kind of been on this whirlwind tour, and is coming back to find this.
Yeah.
Because that happens as well. Like that's, what I think happened to Valorfax as well, and then BR also comes back to find. I don't know. He didn't come back.
No,
he was just here and captured. But so I kind of get that impression. He's a really interesting character. I like how inept he is in comparison to how how kind of imposing, if not his shield, his sword is.
Yeah, his sword. Can you get his sword?
Yeah, you get it when you in 1-4.
Okay.
Yeah, same time you get the shield.
By that point, I was in such a dash to get it done that I don't think I used it.
Well, it happens right before the end game too, so you don't have very much chance to use it if you'd like to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you rescue him here. So there's a lot of like paranoia that I have around rescuing Ostrava, specifically here and in 1-2, in that he just starts wandering around and fighting stuff, and I don't want him to die. Like I don't want it to turn into like Sigmar kind of thing where just this is this incredibly delicate through line that you have to maintain in order for this quest to pay off, and just for him to die unceremoniously to some guard dogs doesn't seem like the way it should end. So I always try and make sure that the path is clear.
He has a very limited patrol route.
Yeah,
like if you follow him, he doesn't want to keep going. He just wants to walk to that like the little merchant stalls or what have you, that are up there, and then just keep walking back and forth in an L.
Yeah,
is his the entirety of his patrol route. But that gets really true in 1-3.
Yeah, like
1-3, it is very difficult to keep him alive. So.
It's worth saying that he will drop that mausoleum key even if he's killed by another enemy in the game. Like you can still get the key off his corpse.
Also, since I killed him to get the mausoleum key here, it's hilarious how long it takes NPCs to aggro. Like I stabbed him in the back and kicked him down to the Dreglings. Like, no, you deal with it. And then went back there while he was fighting Dreglings and kept stabbing him in the back. And he stays amicable through about 5 backstabs. And then he's like, okay, 1-4. Like that could have been an accident.
I know people like this.
the live journal community.
Yes, I was stabbed in the back by this person, this person, and this person.
You guys. Yeah. Mood betrayed.
Yeah. So you kind of continue through this training area. Moving on up. Again, there's just like defensible positions, archers kind of covering you as you're going to be fighting guys who are ambushing you, jumping off the wall. You run into your first merchant, which was a real like godsend for me at this point. Like, because you can't level up yet. They haven't introduced that mechanic. This is the only thing you can spend on souls. And with my first playthrough, like I did a royal with my first playthrough and did not like his fencing weapon for that. Like I was having a hard time penetrating any of the guys who had a shield, anything like that. So I wanted another weapon, and that was really cool to have the opportunity, even though the selection is fairly limited here.
Yeah, he ends up being fairly useful. So he speaks to the depravities. He just comes out and says, do you want to see some of my wares, most of which are stolen?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
I was watching a name bro run of this level, and he pounced on the mostly stolen. It's like, which ones of these are legitimate wares that you sourced yourself, through legitimate means?
I'm gonna say none of it. Well, maybe he gathered the herbs or whatever.
That's true. He was plucking them out in the grass.
Spit out a corpse's eyes. So. Yeah.
And his accent is so jarring. Everything about the game is so somber until you get to this point, and then he's like, "Hello, I was just going to cross the street," and I was like, "Whoa!" Any Scottish person listening to this podcast, the death threats are going to be sort of rolling in. That is not what I think Scottish people talk like, but that's what that dude sounds like.
The views and accents of Jason Killingsworth do not reflect those of Bonfireside Chat or Duckfeed.tv.
Please. I'm going to have to add another thing to the contact page, aren't I? Just saying hi, a bonfireside chat, Jason.
Yeah. But yeah, his accent is bracing.
I think he says mostly for the same reason that in some states where they do executions, they have multiple switches. And just like one of them is hooked up, but the other 4 aren't. So that way, there's the benefit of the doubt.
Like a firing squad with mostly blanks. Yeah. So you don't have to feel bad. It's kind of like, well, I bought this one, but that one wasn't. That was the legit one, right? That was the legit one. That was the armor he crafted in his crate,
lovingly,
with his rags.
Yes. This was the crescent moon grass that he lovingly harvested himself.
Yeah. You've got it in the notes here. The undead merchant in Dark Souls, male undead merchant, is pretty clearly a reference to this.
Yeah. So yeah.
No, he does not take damage from enemies. A soldier followed me in last time I was here, and I was just trying to buy some stuff, and he hit me in the back, and it hit the merchant, and the merchant started kind of screaming as if I had attacked him, but I saw zeros floating above him.
No.
So that's a difference between the two games. It looks like those kind of NPCs cannot take damage from enemies.
Yeah, that's merciful too.
Yeah.
I thought it was a nice touch that he's sort of barricaded himself into this. Even though so many things about Demon Souls are very sort of nakedly video gamey. Like I think it feels much more video gamey than Dark Souls to me. Because of the segmentation of the archstones and having these kind of 1-1, 1-2, almost 3 style. But this was one of those moments where I thought it was nice. They kind of sort of really couched it inside the fiction and had sort of hold up in there and.
Yeah, it also signals
keeping his customers out. It's not the most effective way to run a shop. But
we've all seen like a dollar store next to a check cashing place that's in a bad part of town. That's like the equivalent of this. It's also a way, like what you're talking about, Jason, also signals that you're not just supposed to attack on sight. This guy, like, it's a little bit unusual, like that, his posture and everything, because he is, essentially one of the guys you've been fighting. At the top of this tower, you kind of go back to, though, you eventually get to this dragon spot where you can kind of go forward over this bridge or to your left towards where those dragons that you saw were kind of sunning themselves. It should be noted that if you are in White World Tendency, they disappear, which means you can get this treasure, which, again, the Demon Souls habit of giving you end game treasure, kind of, not end game, but like really, really strong treasure kind of right out the bat.
Yeah.
Because the shield here is the one that I tend to use for the entire game, and then you also get the equivalent of Havel's ring.
Yeah,
the Equipburn ring.
Yeah.
Can you suicide run that treasure? I don't think I've ever had the nerve been able to summon the nerve to try it. But
portions of it you can.
You can actually get everything. You can't suicide run. You have to kind of bait the dragons out. It's really difficult, and I've never managed to do it.
Yeah.
The tail one, you have to wait for him to do a specific move that has like a really long kind of recharge. And the dragon one, you have to bait him into breathing fire on the bridge, and you can run back and just barely get the equipment under him before he comes back and fries you.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's very difficult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that purple flame shield it's an especially good get. If you're going to to Stonefang after this as well. Most of the bosses can be rendered ineffectual by it.
Yeah. It's got that insane fire resistance. There's also a fire resistant ring here as well.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a nice little bit of the guy who had that got.
How did these people die?
Yeah, exactly. Like all of the fire resistant gear is right here, and that ring of great strength. That's not Herculean strength. Definitely belonged to Valorfax.
Mm-hmm.
So he was here at some point and probably died here, which kind of ties into what I was talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and I don't think you can kill these guys by hitting them with arrows from here. I don't think that the distances end up working out. The times when you can kill the dragons are like when they're swooping, which makes them exercises in patience.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, you definitely can't kill the blue one. You just shoo him off, essentially.
Yeah, he takes off.
Yeah. The best way to deal with the red one is actually to kill him in 1-2.
Yeah. Which is still a pain to do, unless you have some real serious kind of heavy hitting spells.
Mm-hmm.
Crossing that bridge, the dragon will kind of run through and kind of do like a flame run on you, and you kind of have to time it there. This is kind of a practice for what they're going to do at the end of 1-2, which is a real dick move, where you have to sprint across an area and find the other end of it heavily defended. Which this is not nearly as bad. Like the 2 crossbowmen at the end of this are not nearly as bad as what they do in 1-2.
Right.
But yeah, and then you pull the lever and you get the cutscene that signals that we're entering the end of the level.
Love that cutscene.
Yep.
Like you think like, oh man, that big gate at the beginning, it's finally open. Oh, what's that arrow?
Yep.
Yeah.
That giant spear.
Boing.
So yeah,
the serration on it just seems like kind of a bit excessive.
Cruel.
I'd say without the serration, you're still dead. And
yeah. Well, the serration plays into, so it's a version of the weapon you can kind of make from his soul. And the serration is designed to destroy equipment, like the weapon that you can get, the scraping spear. So it's meant to not only kill somebody, but fuck up their armor.
Yeah.
So this whole way that you've been going, if you've been being really diligent about getting items and everything like that, again, when I talk about giving you these rings, the kind of way the game will kind of throw you some bones, you've been finding a lot of turpentine and kind of black fire bombs and the like, which is great because you are heading into this boss fight very shortly.
Yeah, where melee weapons are almost entirely useless.
Yeah.
I was going to mention one thing about the sort of castle setting even before we headed into the boss. Like, there's a note I jotted down while I was playing through it again this past week, and that was that it's so easy to get lost in kind of a castle environment because you don't have really obvious landmarks, and everything's the same color, and it just looks very, very homogeneous. So I feel like it's easier to get kind of turned around, and it's almost like being lost in the woods, like where you're just surrounded by trees and you're just surrounded by stone, basically. So, like in Eco, Ico, as most people say, it can be so maddening, like trying to sort of place yourself and figure out exactly where you are in the environment. And so I found that kind of devilish, like with this particular area. It starves you for kind of obvious reference points to navigate through.
And that speaks to something that I mentioned earlier, which is you're doubling back on yourself in a lot of regards, especially if you are working around inside the walls. After you open up the shortcuts, it ends up being a little bit better, but when you're making your way through, it's very disorienting, and until you come out, for air, and kind of like see where you're at in relation to kind of this central mountain that's at the center of this, for some reason, yeah, you're right, it is disorienting. Yep.
I found that to be, I got way more kind of lost and disoriented in Stonefang.
Yeah.
Than this, but I found that to be true of a lot of areas in Demon's Souls where there's less discretion in the kind of color and object palette in an individual world, where I didn't have as many kind of reference points. So I guess it happened to me a lot in in 5.1 as well. But yeah, that is definitely true here, and especially if you're trying to backtrack to something. So like when I try to come back in White World Tendency and find where those dragons are, I sometimes have a hard time like getting back to the spot. Even though I just opened a shortcut that more or less leads from there. I remember the most efficient path.
Yeah, I wonder if I think it would probably be harder to sort of from memory try to draw that map. I feel like Dark Souls, I could sort of, if I really focus, I could redraw like most of the areas in pretty fine point detail. But with this one, I feel like things would just become so MC Escher like so quickly that. And I just wonder if it's designed that way on purpose, just to try to turn your head around.
Well, Dark Souls, most of their locales are kind of designed like theme parks a little bit. It's the Disney rule where you're always able to look up and see the castle at the center. Right. There's a greater context for where you're moving around, and you can always orient based on either a distinctive landmark that you can see or noticing where you are in relation to something before. Eco does this actually really well in that regard, even if the color palette is more restricted in that than it is in Dark Souls. But for Demon Souls, because it's kind of these linear corridors that you're going to, and especially stage to stage and world to world, there's a little continuity. I think that kind of leads into the areas being kind of labyrinthine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it feels very maze-like to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the phalanx.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this guy.
Yeah. Well, it's a her.
Oh yeah.
So that's something that I love about the bosses in Boletaria. There's some great bosses elsewhere, but kind of how that pays off in 1.4 is tremendous. So, is it spoilers or is it out of order to say that as we're going through, we're actually fighting Alance like top guard, top tier knights, right?
You're right.
And she was the archer, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And she's surrounded by these, I call them goos, but they're called hoplites in the lore and on the wiki here, which are these shield men. I can see them being hit by whatever magic it is and evolving into these things, and they've got these spears, and they're gathered around this glowing core that is Phalanx herself. And so, in order to actually do damage to the boss, you have to clear these these hoplites off. In order to expose her. And the best way to do that, because you don't really have access to, any kind of magic spells, and the shields are incredibly physically resistant, is to use those fire bombs. So it doesn't make any sense to hoard any souls at this point. You just want to go back to either, the blacksmith in the Nexus or the undead merchant and buy as many fire bombs as possible. I forget, can you buy them?
You can buy them from the Undead Merchant.
Yeah,
I don't know if you can buy them from the Nexus.
Yeah,
they're expensive. I think they're 500. They're 500 souls.
Yeah,
so, they're pretty dear.
Mm-hmm. It should be noted that the actual Phalanx herself doesn't have any attacks. Like she can not hurt you. So like she is not. It is entirely about this kind of defensive perimeter she set up. Also, and I just saw this for the first time. Have you seen her like fling one of them?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really weird. Like I'd never seen it before, just because I was probably too close in, and she kind of filled up my screen.
Mm-hmm.
But she can toss them across the room, kind of making this arena really interesting because, you want to fight for a little while. You can only take a couple of spear shots. So if you need to retreat and hide behind a pillar to heal or to equip, some turpentine or what have you, she can throw guys into that corner and, kill you while you're fiddling around with your inventory, pretty easily.
Yeah. In addition to the hoplites that are kind of attached to her glowing core, like some kind of Castlevania monster, there are free floating ones that are going to come after you, and those do respawn. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that the boss was named after this sort of protective
NES game.
Because the phalanx isn't like, by killing the phalanx or just those the hoplites around the core, you don't actually do any damage to the boss. And I think in most boss fights, like that would be attributed to the bottom line, I guess, in terms of the HP of the boss. But like that's just shield. Yeah.
And kind of the symbiosis between archers and shields actually plays out. It's in the bosses that we're going to be talking about this episode, the archer knight being protected by the shield, and then later on the shield knight being protected by archers, kind of speaks to the way that these what are now demons but were once knights would have fought together. So there's a nice consistency to that.
Yeah, I agree. All in all, it's not a very difficult boss if you know to use fire.
Right.
If you chose a sorcerer for your playthrough, like this is more or less a walk. Your fire spell that you start with is will tear this guy up.
Yeah.
But all in all, I really like this boss quite a bit. Like I like the design on him a lot. I like that indirect kind of attacking he does.
Yeah.
When you beat him, you open up a portal back to an archstone back to the Nexus, and you become human. And we have to head back to the Nexus before we can head on to the next level here.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably worth saying that the whole level has been kind of putting fire, and it's kind of been screaming fire at you. You know.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, you've got all those exploding barrels. You've got people firebombing. You've got even just freestanding fires burning kind of out in front of the castle, and so if you don't have that fire idea planted in your head by the time you get to this boss, you probably haven't been paying very close attention.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
Yeah. Your fire vocabulary.
Yeah. That's definitely a good point. Oh, and you get the lead demon soul.
Oh yeah.
So you get a soul. We'll talk about them as they come up for specific things, but the like really 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 cool upgrade system, for uses for boss souls in this game. This one is one of the less interesting ones or less useful souls, but even as soon as the boss we're going to fight in the next area, you start running into very cool kind of varied uses.
Yeah.
For this stuff. So this can become the scraping spear, which is really just kind of a PvP dick weapon.
Yeah.
Like if you want to fight people and also ruin their equipment.
And their day. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only reason why you'd use it. Can it turn into anything else? Is it like a spell, like a...
Nope. You can chug it for like a minuscule amount of souls.
Yeah, like 1,500 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I generally make the scraping spear out of it. And by generally, I mean in my one playthrough, just because I like spear-type weapons a lot.
Yeah.
And
how I've never played with it. How is it?
It's fine. It's not as good as like a really well upgraded wing spear, but yeah, it is a passable spear. Yeah. So yeah, the scraping spear is pretty cool. For anybody who's playing along for the first time, don't get confounded by like, what do I do with this? Where do I go? You're actually not able to do it until you beat the boss in 2-2, and get his soul and feed it to a specific blacksmith that you'll find later. So just hold on to these for now if you intend to use them, if you're intrigued by that. Yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea. No Dark Souls primer. I was just burning the souls, and then
oh no.
Yeah,
I was so young then. I was
in the head in 2009.
That was naive. As I said at the beginning of this podcast, this episode of this podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. And for you, our dear listeners, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/bonfiresidechat. Again, that is audibletrial.com/bonfiresidechat for your free audiobook.
So back at the Nexus, we've got some kind of plot dump going on. Yeah. The maiden in black comes back and she, kind of congratulates you and says that she wants you to speak to the Monumental. And there's a kind of a camera like crane shot that maybe shows you around where the Monumental might be in this huge kind of winding, system of interlocking helixes that is the Nexus.
Yeah.
It shows you that doorway kind of leading up the stairs, kind of to let you know there is a doorway up there. If you kind of go up the stairs, you'll find a way up.
Yep. And then you head up and you find the Monumental. Once you find him, it's really great. And somebody mentioned this in a comment, I think, in the last episode, and I think it was Murph, and I agree that the image of the one kind of monk with the candle in front of him who's alive, amongst all these other ones who had died sitting in the position where they'd kind of kept vigil, is really striking.
Yeah.
Is one of my favorite images in the game when you first kind of stumble across all of these dead people sitting cross-legged.
Because he looks like the Golden Child from that Eddie Murphy movie.
Exactly.
He totally does. But yeah, it is one of the weird sort of moments where, like, normally the Souls games don't force lore on you. Like, it's all about just kind of breathing it in as you move around. And this is this weird aberration where it's like, not only do you have to go up there to listen to this for it to unlock the Archstones, and like it forces you to kind of digest this lore, and you watch this sort of cutscene, but you also have to just kind of go up this tedious staircase to get there. So it's kind of an odd moment in the context of how the Souls games do things, kind of as a general. I thought.
Yeah, it's pretty rare. And the game won't do it again. for a really long time. Actually kind of give you an info dump, but it is it's kind of, I guess, similar to like the Dark Souls doesn't do anything similar to that. Like you have your opening kind of narration and then never again. This one kind of has this little bonus kind of tag to it. The monumental kind of gives you. Cole, are you planning on putting in the dialogue from it?
If I can find it, yes.
Okay. If not, though, we'll go ahead and address it. Just in case. The one thing, Jason, back-end stuff for running a Dark Souls podcast is it's much harder to find dialogue from Demon Souls online than it is Dark Souls. Yeah, it's trickier. Mm-hmm. He tells you like the big takeaway from this is that this has all kind of happened before. So long ago, a very similar thing happened where huge portions of the world were erased by fog, and the monumentals were formed to bind together that fabric of reality and fight against it. They center themselves at the Nexus and install these archstones all across the earth and kind of bestow them to the leaders of these various kingdoms. You get this kind of roll call of the different areas you'll be visiting. Mm-hmm. And they mention themselves, they're half-living sentinels, but she or he is the only one that remains. But the big thing the takeaway I took from this was that this is cyclical, that this whole cycle has kind of happened before.
Yeah, and that all of it is kind of caused by a lust for soul arts, right? So when the Monumentals initially, restored order and, vanquished the old one, they banned the soul arts. And so that brings a little bit more context for, like, oh, yeah, Alan done fucked up, right? Mm-hmm.
Well, and when you have a new game plus kind of model, I think it's a nice little fictional wrapper to kind of lend that whole cyclical idea of starting over at the beginning of the world again, and so it could tie into that.
I love the idea of this fog just erasing the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it just like ever since we kind of like broached the topic of the of the Dark Tower relating to this, like that is such a huge thing in that series. The idea of literally fog or mist that represents these tears and degradations in the fabric of reality. Anybody who has read those books and kind of knows the significance of that, like it was a real eureka moment for me. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was going to ask you guys if you thought the fog gates were tied to the sort of that creeping fog kind of set up in some of those earlier lore dumps. If there was any connection between the two, and before they were obviously they appear in Dark Souls, which doesn't have that fog storyline. But do you think there's any connection between the fog gates and the fog, kind of more generally?
I don't know. Like I don't really have a theory on it. They only act as something other than just a passable kind of membrane only once at the end of the next area we're going to talk about, where they become becomes this kind of literal wall. Same as the orange fog gates in Dark Souls. But I don't it makes sense that there would not be two types of magic fog in this world. But I can't make the connection to where the fog of the world is separating these areas in kind of discrete zones like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like there should be.
It's for a smarter man than I to draw, or a woman to draw the line between those two things, but just seed it out there for the curious.
It's something that comes up every once in a while in the comments. When people come in, I've heard enough disparate theories that I just kind of know that I don't know if it's not that it's not worth the time, but just kind of like I've never seen one that satisfied me enough to make me consider it to be anything more than a gameplay consideration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It should be noted that at this point, so there's a couple things you can do kind of housekeeping wise at the Nexus. One, you can level up now by touching the demon inside the Maiden in Black. And, level up structure, every level costs progressively more. You should be able to level up a few times, though. Similar, and just on an advice tip, similar to Dark Souls, initially maybe level up towards equipment that you want to use.
Yeah.
And then, vitality and endurance are never a waste of time.
Right.
So, Yeah. And then if you exhaust Stockpile Thomas's dialogue, you find out that the brooch that you found on that corpse that was hanging from the rafters outside of the kind of gate there actually belonged to his daughter, which is real fucked up. That like in the Demon Star of Boletaria, they're literally stringing up little girls on to hang from the kind of the sides of the walls. You can choose to give it to him or not. Why you wouldn't would entirely be like a gameplay thing. Like you thought there would be another use for it later. There's not. And you're just really cruel if you decide not to give him something to remember his daughter by. Yeah. And he gives you a room that or a ring that increases your item burden, which is really useful to take with you whenever you go in case you find some cool armor.
Yeah, it's a good utility ring. And so we've mentioned both of these rings. Did we talk about the distinction between carry weight and equip weight? Yeah, we did. In the
first
13,
episode.
Yeah, the first episode of the 13 differences. So both of those are really very, very useful. Yeah.
Yeah. So now we're heading to World 1-2. This is actually, most of the way we're treating this is going to be out of an actual playthrough order. You can do World 1-2 now, just fine if you're doing a traditional playthrough. That's not that big a deal. That's how I played it my first time.
Me too.
And it's not too tough. So it starts off, and you talk to. Oh yeah, he said it later. I was going to talk about that Strava dialogue, but he talks about it soon. Yep. So each stage starts where the last one ended. You go back to the Archstone that teleported you back, and except there's a gate that's open, and you head in. You're kind of in like you got it here as a stagecoach room, which is more or less looks correct, and it's kind of like a nice little holdover from the last boss fight. There are those hoplite things are kind of crawling around in the dark.
Yeah.
Really diabolically placed, really hard to see. So you can be picking up treasure from one, and there's another one just outside your field of vision.
Yeah.
Ready to chuck a spear at you.
Yeah, they've got kind of these overlapping circles of spear danger area. Yeah. If you head over to the left there, you can find Ostrava, who has gotten himself into another pickle.
He's like the Laurel and Hardy, like just like like and I don't even know how he got himself in there. Like he was just kind of like, does he not know his way home? He's just like walking down that hallway and just it happened to get all lousy with dreadlings like while he was taking a nap or something. But you essentially have to make your way halfway across this bridge and loop back to kind of clear out the path for him.
Yeah.
As what he's asking you. But kind of most importantly, he tells you to be careful when you do this because the bridge has become a feeding ground for dragons. And that's the entirety of the stage is this kind of like, it's a real linear path. It's a bridge. There are areas above and below. But you are just trying to make your way across this bridge that is lousy with dragons and soldiers.
Lousy with dragon.
Yeah, lousy
Singular.
with dragon. Yes.
Singular.
Did you guys farm the hoplites in that area to upgrade your weapons? Because I remember spending a lot of time just running around and hacking them up and going back to the Archstone and trying to, when I was beating my head against the game and trying to get some kind of advantage. I guess that would be sort of the equivalent of the slug farming.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But, I did so a little bit when I was close. Like I think I was after just getting the natural ones that I'd gotten from 1-1. I could upgrade my weapon to +2, and then I was a couple away from +3. So I've done that. I haven't spent tons of time doing it, but I did a little bit.
Yeah. Boletaria farming, to that note, I never spent a lot of time farming the hoplites. However, I would, whenever I ran low on grass, I would do a couple of runs around 1-1 in order to get some crescent moon grass, especially, if I was kind of hitting my head up against a particularly difficult boss run. Yeah. That's just the most effective way to do it. You get a really good diverse spread of grasses. And 1-2 after you defeat the dragon, if you opt to defeat the dragon, is a really good place to farm for those grasses as well. Yeah.
The drop rate in this game is pretty generous for that stuff.
Yeah, and you have a guaranteed the half moon grass drops from that. Does it drop every time from the blue-eyed knight?
Yep.
I believe it does.
Yeah. So even if you hadn't talked to Ostrava, you would know that this bridge is bad news because there are charred corpses everywhere. And just, enemies setting up defensible positions in areas where they will soon get murdered by a dragon. The kind of central thing that's going on is you moving between these checkpoints where this dragon is doing passes. You can survive a hit from this dragon with your shield up if you're not caught right in the middle of it. which I found like on my later when I was dying against the Tower Knight and was just trying to run through as fast as I could. One of the runs is actually really difficult to make in one sprint. So I got hit by the fire, and you can actually kind of survive it. And I had pretty heavy armor on. I was playing as a knight. It almost means certain death, and if it doesn't actually kill you, the crossbowmen at the top of the next tower will. You get to that tower, kind of timing that out, and you can either take the high road and continue over this dragon area, or if you want to rescue Ostrava or try a different way, you can kind of go to this kind of like underpath underneath the bridge. Heading back to Ostrava, it's essentially just about darkness. Again, it's a real field of vision thing where there are enemies looming just outside your field of vision. And this is a really good place if you're playing online to get warnings about what's coming up next. Because they'll say, beware. I don't think it says dog. I don't think that word's in there. I don't know which word is in the vocabulary. But then also, beware archers as you're heading back to Ostrava.
Yeah. He is very, very heavily guarded.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, like I said before, if you rescue him too early or if you haven't cleared this out, he ends up getting into combat. And then, you risk losing him. And cutting his quest line off early.
Yep.
Yeah.
Getting to him is difficult. The dogs are a real son of a bitch.
Yeah. That's pretty much why I exclusively stay up top.
Yeah. It's very difficult. If you go down below, you can run into the merchant again. One of the cool things about this game is that the merchant you meet in the first world will follow you throughout the world. And I just get the impression like you're the only sane person left to spend money. So, of course he's going to follow you. There's nobody else offering him souls. So, the merchants will kind of reposition in each level. But that's your reward for getting past the dogs and kind of doing the lower path between the first and second guardhouse.
Right.
There.
Yeah. But eventually you're forced to, remain topside because the bottom path gets closed off.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you want to fight the dragon, this is where you can do it from any of these towers. You can use arrows or spells, especially if you chose a royal and you have the circlet that regenerates your mana. That makes it not easy because you kind of have to manually aim. The delay in firing off a shot means that he'll probably be out of lock on doesn't really work for him. It takes a long time to do so.
Yeah, I did it on my first playthrough with the lava bow, and it took about maybe like 20 minutes.
Yeah. It's not really worth doing, at least not here.
No.
There's a later area where having that dragon. Well, I guess that's not even really true either because at that point you're already past him. You can kill the one in 1.4. So probably not worth killing these dragons.
Right.
It's cool that you can do it.
I didn't actually kill the dragons. Do you get any kind of drop from them, or is it just the nuisance alleviated?
Primarily, it's the nuisance. However, you do get a soul item, but you can't exchange it for anything. So it's just, you just get the souls for killing them, and then it's a souvenir essentially,
or like 5,000 souls, I think,
something like that.
It's got a unique name and everything. It looks like it can be turned into something, but it can't.
Yeah. Well, it's like with the Hellkite. If you fight the Hellkite Drake, you get a soul off of him too. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll look it up because you're doubting me. So. Sorry. It just seems. You definitely.
That was a challenge. That was a direct challenge.
Jesus, I can't say anything without having it be doubted.
That's not true. There's plenty of things that you say that. And regardless of what happens in Dark Souls, in Demon Souls, you have to do this last little run up between the second and third guardhouse, which is really like a marathon. And this is what I was referencing later, where you're going to do this kind of sprint and find the end of it just with a whole bunch of fuck you in your face. Like I think it's four archers, a blue knight, and then a blue knight shortly behind him. And the path there's a wagon in the way, so you can't run past them easily.
Yeah.
This is a real, fuck you moment. Like, this killed me a lot of times on my first playthrough.
And what's even worse is that if you are at pure black, it's either pure black or pure white. 2 more blue knights are added to this end area.
Yeah, it's pure black.
Yeah, pure black.
Yeah. That's insane.
And I just love feeling that that dragon's fire at your back, like just cutting off that retreat, and just it's just like the equivalent of like just being sort of having a big sort of crowd around you in like a fight, like when you're like a pre-adolescent and everyone's just kind of pushing you into the into the person who's like swinging at you. It just pushes you into the fray, and I like the design of it.
Yeah.
Or go ahead.
These games are really great at creating tension when they reduce your ability to maneuver or get out of the way, and so when you're quite literally between a rock and a hot place, it gets really stressful.
If you're doing, you've got it in the notes here, and I discovered this on this playthrough too, is that you can actually just kind of sprint through this level. If you're willing to YOLO it, and I found at the end the best kind of strategy was I would kind of just shield up and wait. The crossbowman would just plink off my shield, wait for the blue knight. He'll get frustrated and smash apart the cart, and then you can run past.
Yeah.
Because there's no shortcut or switchback or anything. The level is too short for that. So if you are dying against the tower knight, which you very well could, because he's pretty tough, as we'll talk about in a moment. It can get frustrating to kind of meticulously make your way through this level every single time.
Yeah.
Going through the lower paths. We should talk about, it's on the notes here, but upstairs from where the Tower Knight is your first crystal lizard.
Oh, yeah.
In the game. We explained the mechanics of those last time, but one of the things that note for is that you can hear this kind of tinkling when they're around. And in that area right before the fog gate is where you can first hear it, and kind of is your clue to explore.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's one of the interesting things about the decision to not have music for the majority of the game. It gives the opportunity for these small sound cues to kind of direct you or to pull you into a particular place. Or and I even noticed when I was fighting the Blue Knight that it drops this little sort of heartbeat thump into the sound mix, like when you're fighting him. And it's just this unconscious thing that just makes you just ratchets up that tension of like if your heart isn't pounding, like here's just this little sort of sound cue to force it to unconsciously force it to. But yeah, so like that little tinkling is something that if you had this big epic sort of strings, sort of orchestra playing over the whole game, you might not catch those cues quite as readily.
Yeah. Sound design.
Yeah, like excellent sound design in this game. Like put a gun against your heart and force it to beat. You're ready to head in and fight this enemy. This cutscene before the Tower Knight is amazing. And is also like after this point, like where I'd run into that kind of wall at the end of the bridge, and not really, know it. Like I felt like I had to get out of the way of these guys before I got fried, so it was super intense. Having this kind of like, real pull the rug out from under you moment, and you get introduced to these fat officials who are, real just serious jerks here, and the kind of that chuckle that he does, like I had such a good like Dark Souls smile, like at that point I'm like, oh, okay, and it was a really good feeling. Like,
their smirk is the smirk of Demon Souls. Like it's just it's kind of mocking you. Yeah, and then they. The one thing that is sort of a bit weird is their little effeminate kind of prancy.
They're crepes.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like a slightly problematic shortcut for saying there's something aberrant about these dudes.
Yeah, the way that they move.
Yeah.
I could see that. I thought of it more of like a mischievous kind of like, because since they're demons, I was thinking of it more of like a kind of impish.
Yeah.
Kind of reading on it. The feeling like when I first got here where you get in, you see the Tower Knight and he's very intimidating, and then this fat official calls up all these archers to kind of take pot shots at you while you think at this point you're going to have to fight them like that. It reminded me of when I first saw the rafters above the painted world in Dark Souls, where I just had to like, there's no way I can. What are you talking about? No, I'm not. No, that's not going to happen. It was the exact same feeling, and I love that feeling. So this is a tricky boss if you didn't choose a magic class.
Yeah.
If you chose Royal, he is a pushover. If not, he's very likely to kill you a bunch of times.
Yeah. So there are two ways to go about this. You can either take the high road or the low road. Regardless, it is best if you go up and take out these archers first, because there's really no reason not to. It gets you away from this guy, and it stops them from being, like pains in your side. And then you can either do ranged attacks from up top, and you risk him, just using his spear to, just say, get down from there. Or you can go down and attack his ankles and hope that he falls down.
Right. And what it introduces a thing that's kind of neat that this game does that Dark Souls doesn't, is that there are more, boss arenas have, safe zones in them. So there's more, there are chances to kind of fight the bosses in waves and take, moments to heal and kind of collect yourself and strategize in a way that I don't feel like happens in Dark Souls. I don't think there are any enemies that you can just kind of hang out somewhere.
Right.
And I really like that about this. So when I first ran up and I killed the archers and I got hit by one of those spears and nearly died, I just thought, oh shit, and was running around like a chicken with its head cut off. And then eventually found those little kind of corner posts where you're protected from the spears, you're protected from the crossbowmen, and you can kind of strategize, which is really cool. The first time I fought him, I was playing a Royal, and you just zap him in the head with magic missiles a bunch of times, and it's very easy. The second time, though, when I was doing a melee playthrough, I had to really kind of figure it out, because he does this kind of shield slam attack that has a huge area effect. It's really, really difficult to get around and will likely one-shot you. And that is when I noticed the steam coming out of his ankles. So I was watching from this safe vantage point, kind of planning out my attack, which is a really cool, the kind of experience I think is kind of lost in Dark Souls. Like we talked about, the Capra Demon and how the arena is the boss fight, and how it would have been cool if you would have seen the arena before you went into it. So it was about planning out how you're going to attack without having to have not mandatory, but a death that felt mandatory going into it. And there are some levels, there's a couple of other bosses too, where you're given these safe spots to kind of survey what's going on. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate that. I think that's really, really neat.
Yeah.
Part of what I love about going through those fog doors is I think that kind of tactical sort of approach would be really interesting, but there's something just so harrowing about stepping through that door and having no concept of what's coming at you, of what creature or what kind of set of attacks are going to be unleashed on you. And that's why I think the sort of guiding sort of principle of any Souls boss fight is to just immediately kind of retreat and kind of just run around and see what the boss does.
I don't disagree with you. I guess what I mean is that when you get in, you're hit with that, and you're hit with that here as well. The Tower Knight can one-shot you as soon as you walk through the door if you're pokey. But if you can get past that initial attack, you can go somewhere and kind of strategize elsewhere and kind of observe. Whereas even in Dark Souls, when that's happening, if you're running away from Quelaag, you're dodging lava fields and things like that. There's not really that. So this kind of, I feel like, does it both. You get that shock and awe, and then you also get to do some planning.
Kind of the boxers kind of going into their corner and sort of thinking about licking your wounds, maybe sort of thinking about what your approach is going to be in the next foray, kind of out into the arena. And I do really like that kind of rhythm. Okay, here's my next sort of sprint down.
I'm gonna make another pass. And with this guy, it definitely ends up being like that if you're fighting him the traditional way, because after you kind of bash his ankles apart until they both kind of break down, he'll fall down for a time, which will one-shot you. So if you don't get out of the way, you will die, which, fuck you, Dark Souls or Demon Souls. But if you get out of the way, unless you're using a very strong weapon at this point, which you probably aren't if you came right after 1-1, it's difficult to kill him in one pass. So he'll get back up, and you have to literally go and do another round of taking out his ankles. This second playthrough, and any of my melee playthroughs, this tends to be kind of a sticking point for me. I find him difficult to kill with melee.
This is so both Phalanx and the Tower Knight are making me really regret my decision to not use sorcery this time around. Just rolling with a Faith Caster, I am realizing how much I relied on Soul Arrow as a crutch.
Yeah. Well, you use that opportunity to. This will make you grow as a person.
Yes, which is why I'm self-imposing that, and why I didn't immediately re-roll as a royal.
I think that's why I do love kind of forcing myself to swallow hard and play that warrior playthrough, because you're going to taste the game. I feel like sorcery is almost like a sequence break that's kind of built into the character, him or herself. You can't when you have to smell the body odor of that night, and get up around its ankles, and it's an experience of the fight that's spamming from the ramparts that you're just never going to rival, I think.
Your kind of build and character class and way you're rolling out changes the experience in a lot of different ways, not just those two. So, which is one of the things that keeps me coming back and doing kind of these different Let's Plays of Dark Souls, because you give yourself different restrictions, and it really. So there's more than just. So I agree with you, but there's more than just kind of like a
sure.
There's lots of different. So going without a shield is very different. Like even going with a bow and arrow is different than sorcery because it's slower, and you can manually aim and it does less damage. There's a lot of different kind of doing a two-hand, like doing a parrying run. Like I love that about these games is there's just so many different permutations on what each individual micro encounter can be. They're all very different experiences. I agree with you that sorcery ends up being kind of like the easiest way to not get your hands dirty in it. And this in Dark Souls, I found that the first half of the game was a breeze with that. The second half I had a lot of difficulty with. Mm-hmm. In Demon Souls, I find more or less like sorcery kind of trivializes almost the whole game.
Yeah.
Not trivializes, but makes it very easy. Mm-hmm. Almost the entire game. So I would recommend if anyone who's listening to this who's only done kind of one playthrough, regardless of which one it is, try another one and you'll be kind of surprised at how it changes the experience.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I wonder if the sorcery melee kind of decision is kind of the game's version of giving you kind of a difficulty mode option kind of at the outset. Obviously it's not couched in that kind of language at all, but I think it probably is the closest thing. The difficulty is still bruising, obviously, mm-hmm. but it's like if you want to soften it just that little bit, here's this option that gives you that that opportunity.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I feel that's how I've always felt about that. Killing the Tower Knight, again, no mean feat. But killing him, you get to go back. You open up that art zone. You get his soul, which I ended up using for the the Great Barrier spell. The exact name I can't remember on my first playthrough, and that's very useful. The kind of defensive spell you can get from him.
Yeah, that's what I ended up going with as well. Although it was a little bit of a difficult decision.
What is the other thing you can do with it? There's another...
Oh, you know what? I was thinking of something else. The spell that you get is warding. Otherwise, you can chug it for 4,400.
Okay, so this is still when there's kind of mono uses for souls. They haven't introduced kind of... Okay, mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, warding is good.
Man, I'm really going to miss having warding. Just thinking like, I don't know how I'm going to beat the Man-Eater without warding, you guys.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be difficult.
Yeah.
So I think. God, Man-Eater, fucking Man-Eater. Yeah. That is 1-1 and 1-2. Do we have any wrap up things to say about those areas before we kind of move on to admin stuff?
I feel like the design of the Tower Knight there aren't many moments in the Souls games where I feel like I can sense some sort of inspiration being drawn from another game. They seem to kind of, they really do seem to sort of exist in this kind of vacuum of, they're inspired by their own sort of From Software's own sort of development lineage. But with that one, it was the one time where I felt like Shadow of the Colossus kind of felt like an apparent influence. Even in the sort of steam escaping from the ankles, and having that not just a colossal foe, but one that you're going to bring kind of stumbling down to its knees. And I mean, that's sort of a design principle that you see in those early Shadow of the Colossus fights.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure.
So I wonder. I mean, I haven't gotten to ask Miyazaki about it, but I wonder if he was if he would claim any sort of inspiration from that game in particular, maybe.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting idea.
This game does scale so well, and it's awesome that you get to see that so early here.
Yeah, and I would say, and that comes up, it happens early, it happens kind of again and again, and it's one of the things that I feel like it maybe does a little bit better than Dark Souls, that kind of sense of, specifically I'm thinking of, boss fights that range from, Maiden Estrella to the Storm King. Like the things you're going to be fighting as bosses really do kind of run that gamut. There's a little bit of that to Dark Souls. Like Sif, Sif is definitely like a pretty imposing figure, but I definitely it might not be something I can fully articulate. It might just be something I felt stronger with Demon Souls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just the stuff in Demon Souls tends to be awe-inspiring in a way that in Dark Souls it tends to be a little bit more like textured and interesting and horrifying, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Definitely, maybe like the sort of difference between a jump scare and like just a tension building kind of approach to horror. Like Demon Souls really does kind of give you that just kind of bracing slap in the face. With, but yeah, and even the Tower Knight, like he is. I love how that character is designed like a castle himself. Like
oh yeah,
like his that the shield is just like this sort of impassable gate, and then and of course, like instead of stone, it's just every inch of him is just this ballast of impregnable steel. And I just when I saw his design, I had that same feeling that you mentioned, Gary, about just there's no way to penetrate this facade. Yeah. There's no way to bring this boss down. Like you've handed me an impossible obstacle.
Yeah, this is the end of the game.
Yeah,
this whole thing is like an indie game. Indie game that you can't beat.
You have to burn the official.
Yeah, and then just on top of the archers, which, like I said, I didn't realize that you could, go up and kill them, which is a real godsend with that. I mean, just imagine, like, speedrunners do it without killing the archers, obviously, and that's really impressive to watch for me, because there's the risk of getting stun locked anytime when the stakes are that high.
Yeah,
or just yipes.
God, I can't imagine speed running this game.
It's interesting. It's fun to watch. Like it's pretty interesting to see, because it definitely articulates differently than a Dark Souls speedrun does. So I wonder if Aiden's ever done it. Like I wonder if Uber Goose has ever done a Demon Souls or given that a shot.
We can ask him.
I just think it's fascinating about this area how it just takes every single fantasy cliche and just serves it up. So like it's a castle, dragons, knights. Like it hits the biggest columns of the sort of the most obvious reference points of that kind of Tolkien-esque sort of fantasy, and then it just uses kind of all of our assumptions about that kind of setting, and I think it's just this like perfect sucker punch, like just making you feel so comfortable with the kind of ideas. Like you assume so much about it just based on how obvious some of those signifiers are, but then it just gets so subversive in the details, and I think that's one of the things I love sort of about the opening of the game. It seems to play with that in a really intentional way, kind of set you up.
Especially like we're talking about that. I thought that I was on my way to go fight a dragon, initially, in this. I was not expecting them to be like at that point I thought to be an insurmountable kind of just environmental hazard. because I was kind of couched in those fantasy cliches. And the game does that even when you're, choosing your class, like pre-tutorial. Like, all of the classes are fantasy cliches, except perhaps like royal. And I think that's something that Dark Souls does, initially with that character creation too, and then kind of takes it in a totally different direction. I feel like this game kind of had to take place first to establish, like, ease you into, like, yes, this is a fantasy role-playing game, and then kind of, set you up with these elements, and then kind of turns them on their ear to explain to you that it's not really what you should be expecting. And then Dark Souls at that point has already been established, and they can do really weird things with the setting right out of the bat.
Yeah, definitely.
They deviate from it so quickly in Demon's Souls as well. Like, this is just easing you into it, like you said.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, when you see the fat officials, it's just such an immediate screeching kind of left turn in terms of what you associate. Just this weird smirking, dancing sort of with devices of torture on their belts. Like, okay, you all of a sudden you realize you're definitely getting surprised with some stuff.
I want to mention, this is unrelated. This popped into my head though, just so nobody writes us any letters. BR is in 1-2 as well, but since you can't access him yet, we're not going to talk about it yet. Since it's impossible to get to him. But I know we said we were kind of doing a location-based organizational structure, but we're going to talk about him when we talk about 1-3.
Yep.
So cool. Bjor fans. Just hold your horses. I love Bjor too.
Bjor.
I liked his first album.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's so quiet, and then afterwards, got a little pretentious for me.
You wouldn't think a swan would be as protective as that, but
yeah. We both took very different routes to the same joke.
Yep.
So what are we talking about next week, Kole?
Well, next week we're going to be talking about 2-1, which is the beginning of Stonefang Tunnel.
Yes. And our guest, I'm still lining that up. It'll be in the extrasode. We'll announce that. I'm just hammering down a date to be totally sure.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure I've got it, but just want to make sure it's totally, absolutely correct before we go live with it. So listen to the extrasode. We'll punch in a little thing announcing that. So just kind of by way of kind of plugs and everything, Jason, tell us again, where can people find you? What do you do?
I'm the features editor for Edge magazine, so you can find us online at edge-online.com, or find I guess they're in the U.S. You have to look up to import copies of the print magazine at Barnes & Noble, but it's a gorgeously produced magazine. It really is, I think, one of the reasons you should not be wishing print publishing an early demise. It's a beautifully designed magazine, and I can brag on that aspect of it because I don't work on that side, so it's not too self-congratulatory. But and then I have a Twitch channel at twitch.tv /whisking troll, which is an anagram of my surname.
Oh, that's cool.
Killingsworth. So
what's the timeline on that series of books? I mean, that might be. I'm ignorant to that entire thing. So if it's entirely, I'm like,
it's next year.
Next year, okay.
Yeah. Hopefully by summer, but yeah, it'll take a while. There's a lot to research, as you know.
Oh yeah.
Stay in touch as that gets closer, and details are there, and we'll spread the word when people can start going after it.
And I'll buy it.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, spread the word, and also I would like to read it. Yes. So between those two things,
that would be great. I feel like the biggest fans of this series have really congregated and gotten rallied behind the podcast too. So obviously the people listening to this show are. I mean, if there is an audience that I'm writing for, it is for the people listening to this show who just love those games so much and just love them the more they sort of wring them out for information and details, and so it's the gift that keeps on giving.
unlike that tiny beings ring.
Yeah.
That just gives you 10 once.
Yeah. Punishment being the thing that he gives.
Yes. We just behind the scenes, like, we didn't know Jason was doing that book when we talked to him about being on the show, and he just sent us an email. So genuinely excited about that. Mm-hmm. And then Kole and I, we do another show called Watch Out for Fireballs, which is kind of a slightly zoomed out version of this, where you can discuss an entire game in an episode, and primarily about old games. So check that out on the network. Kole does a show with his brother called Those Damn Ross Kids, which is a comedy weird news program, and a video game kind of roundtable discussion show called The Level with some friends of his and friends of mine. We recently did, if you played the fantastic game Gone Home, if not, then please play the fantastic game Gone Home. If you have, we recently did an episode of that with Bob Mackey from Retronauts and Jack Johnson from Video Game Hot Dog. That turned out really well. Yeah.
So that's available as you're listening to this. Just go check that out on Duckfeed.tv. Gary, in addition to doing the show and Watch Out for Fireballs, we do a show called Abject Suffering together, which is about bad old games as opposed to good old games.com.gog. And it's really funny. We would like you to pay attention to it if at all possible. They're short. They come out once every other week. And we think that it's really good work. Gary also does a show with his friend and my friend, Braden Cameron, called The Pitch, which is about solutions for modern living. And then there's a new show coming to the network. Tomorrow, yes, as you're listening, called Pilot Season, which has kind of a strange premise, which it might be better not to explain.
Every episode of Pilot Season could be the first episode of a high concept other kind of podcast. So every single episode is something totally different. That my challenge to myself is to have that be something that you could make a niche podcast about. So it's not always going to be like a marketable one. It's not always going to be something anyone would ever really want to listen to, but it is a new concept for each thing.
Yeah.
So,
do we want to give a preview of what the first episode is going to be about?
I'm going to listen to. I'm editing those today.
Okay.
I'm going to make the first episode whichever one comes out best.
Okay.
Out of the two that we did, but Kole is on episodes 1 and 3 of the show, as well, Brayton. And I think it's really good. So definitely check that out.
Yeah. Facebook.com/bonfireside-chat. And also, it's back to school time. If you're going to be buying any school books, go to Amazon or go to Duckfeed.tv/tipjar. Use our Amazon link. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and that goes to supporting the network.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. I think that's probably about it. And if you have any responses, anything you want to say about 2.1, please go to duckfeed.tv/contact.
Yes.
And share responses. We will share them in the appendix episode, which will be out next week.
Cool. Well, I'd like to say again, thank you so much, Jason, for joining us.
Thanks, man. I've been looking forward to this for as long as this podcast has been going. I hope I have a chance to talk about Souls games.
So happy to have you, man.
Yes.
And it was it was great. It's great, man. I wish we had done it sooner.
Yep.
With Dark Souls. So I'm really, really happy to have you on. Really appreciate it.
Well, when Dark Souls 2 comes out, look me up
for sure.
No doubt at all.
So until next time.
Yeah. Which one did we decide on?
It's a mixture. So I'll say Umbasa.
Okay. Yes. Okay. And then Jason can say whatever he likes.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not editing any of this
prepared.
out. Yeah.
We were not prepared. We're still straightening it out. We've only done one of these. It's not muscle memory yet.
Nope.
But until next time.
Umbasa.
So the world might be mended. Shit.
Sayonara.
And we all pray that we will have far more soon.
Man, I just there's no praise the sun in this.
Yeah, no, praise the sun sounds so good too.
Yeah.
I know. Maybe it's got to be something around the so the world might be mended, or that refrain that just the game keeps looping over and over. But you can't really force
Yeah, like none of them. So the world might be mended is like it's a, it seems like it should modify something.
Yeah.
Yeah, like mend. And you can end by saying "mend the world." It just
So we could say Kole, you could be like, so tune in next time or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then that is what so the world might be mended.
Yeah, no, I like that.
Modifies.
The only other thing that I could think of would be until next time, and then say like one of the messages that can be dropped, and then the other person says, "So the world might be mended," and then we end with Umbasa together.
Like harmonizing.
Umbasa. Yeah, no. So kind of like I would say, until next time, sticky white stuff ahead. So the world might be mended. Umbasa.
Sure. Yeah, if you want to come up with I'm not saying that to be sarcastic, but yeah. I mean, there are a bunch of really good ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I did that. Like that's like 10 minutes of work to pull those out. So
yeah,
I like it. Yeah, that's really nice.
That's not bad. Yeah, we can start. We'll start next time.
Yes. And this will be in the post roll, so everybody knows the rules.
Yeah.